Thank you, and wonderful to be here. I'm going to take us a tiny bit down to earth, but first of all, I will start with the stars, hopefully. So we're at an exceptional moment at the moment in terms of the universe and technology, which is the appliance of science. For the first time, we as humans can see the sun setting on Mars, and this was a picture by the rover in 2005. We can also see way back into time, and this is one of the stars we can see with the James Webb Telescope, and it is 15,000 light years away. And we also know that we can know the diameter of the universe is actually 98 billion light years across the whole diameter. So technology, which is the appliance of science, is really helping us see things. And it's quite extraordinary at this moment in time. But I would argue that actually we have, and I'm going to be anthropocentric for a moment, that the human brain has 100 billion neurons inside it, and it's got 100 trillion synaptic connections. And there are more neurons in the human brain than there are stars in the Milky Way. And we can have multiverses and universes within us, within ourselves, and we can go anywhere we like for free. We don't need technology. We don't need things within our own selves. We can go into other universes, and we can shape-shift and become other things and understand other things, and we can imagine what it's like to be a stone or a tree. And perhaps the only thing you really need to do is close your eyes and dream. So I would say imagination gives us a universe of possibilities beyond the known. But what I really love doing is actually colliding things together, as was said before. And I really believe in the collision of art and science. If you collide them together, then that really triggers the imagination and can take you even further. And that's why I set up the Arts at CERN program at the world's largest particle physics laboratory. And this extraordinary image is one of the detectors on a 27-kilometer ring, which smashes particles just under the speed of light. And in the center of every detector, like this one, which you see, in opposite direction, these particles smash, and these extraordinary machines take a snapshot of them and the collisions which happen inside. And they're actually recreating the moment, a billionth of a second after the universe was created. So that's extraordinary. And I think that also takes imagination as well as planning to get to this incredible point that human beings have built this machine. These are the superconductors which go around the 27-kilometer circle and send these particles in that direction. And for me, places where scientific knowledge is happening are places where the imagination can be taken further. After all, if you think about it, and I don't know if you know, but all the chairs you're sitting on and the ground beneath your feet, 90% of it is full of holes. Matter has this huge separation in between it, and actually you are actually sitting on emptiness. And equally, gravity is the weakest force. The very fact I can lift my arm proves it. And it's electromagnetism, which is one of the strongest forces on the planet. So when you open that up to artists, that kind of idea, those ideas which are scientific facts, then artists go further and think further beyond the paradigm. So that's why I kind of devised the idea of creative collisions, because I really believe in this process of grappling with the ideas of science, and then somehow in your mind's eye and in everything you make and react, and with your gut, your intuition as well, other things can happen and developed from there. So one of the people I actually invited to CERN to collide with the collider was the fashion designer Iris van Herpen. She came in 2014, and she was very, very moved by the fact that electromagnetism is such a powerful force, and equally that the electromagnets at CERN were 200,000 times stronger than the electromagnetic forces on the planet. So she devised a whole fashion collection around this called Magnetic Motions, kind of reflecting on this and pushing 3D technology to another level in 2014. Equally, those conversations which she's had with physicists, and she talks with many scientists actually, she talks to biologists, chemists, all sorts of people, but those just conversations have continued. So she was again inspired by the whole idea that everything is empty, that the chair you're sitting on is 90% full of holes. So what would happen if you push materiality right to the limits and you make materiality as invisible as possible? And I think if you go through her fashion collection now, you will see that she's pushing to make material as invisible as possible. This piece actually came out of a conversation with a physicist called Subodh Patel, and it was about quantum foam. And quantum foam is when space and time, it's a theory, it hasn't been proven yet, when space and time meet and it curls and unfurls and curls inside itself. And she thought, what if I create something which kind of reflects that idea? And this piece actually moves and shimmers, so it goes in and out of light, and it's cut out of leather, but then it's coated with metal, hence the shimmering effect, and hence the fact that it stands up. Like all her work, it really pushes things. So with her folds go upwards, they don't fall down, and somehow really delicate leather becomes like lace or like light. And I would think, yeah, she would agree with me. She's kind of pushing matter to be absent and almost become light itself. So much so that she's always pushing technology. So she was told that to create a dress which was like water was completely impossible, and no technologist could do it. But she worked with them so that they made a dress just like water. So I think artists and scientists meet in a place which is all founded around curiosity and ideas and knowing, and artists do knowledge through the senses, through intuition and imagination, and science does it through testing and objectivity and mathematics, but more about objectivity later. But scientists are imaginative, and they're just as imaginative as artists, and I want to make sure that everybody knows that. As the Nobel laureate Duncan Haldane said, if you can't imagine something marvelous, you're not going to find it. And also he said that to find it, you have to know the means of travel, and you have to imagine that means of travel to get there. So imagination is key for scientists as well. And this is only just now being recognized and acknowledged that scientists are imaginative beings. After all, Einstein dreamt of the theory of relativity, and after he was playing the violin, famously. But this notion of science not being imaginative came out of the Enlightenment in Europe, which created the idea of science and methodology, and it banished what you see here, which is alchemy. Alchemy was the previous form of physics and chemistry, And it was seen to be far too subjective, far too much imaginative. It was looking for the philosopher's stone, it was looking for the meanings of life, it was seen as unregulative, possibly close to witchcraft. So the whole idea of banishing alchemy, which was imaginative, was kind of created through the Enlightenment, which was meant to be about, I think, therefore I am. There's no such thing as anything else outside that kind of discourse. But along came quantum physics in the 20th century, and that's really radically kind of reframed the way we look at science, because science is now seen as possibly being subjective, that every observer looks at things, and when they look at things, they change those things. Therefore, subjectivity is at the heart of science, and also that's why in the 21st century we're talking about imagination as being part of science too. So I kind of create collisions with other kind of forms of science as well. So it's not just physics, which I would argue is one of the most imaginative and extraordinary of the sciences. I created a piece, kind of trilogy called Earth, Water, Sky, and we've been looking at minerals. For example, the mineral collection at the TU Technical University in Berlin, with the Swedish artist Niv Schmidtke and with Johannes Keibel, who's the keeper of the minerals. And what was happening within that kind of residency, which happened over a year, was Niv, they were very, very keen to show that we need to displace the human and that we need to think about those non-sentient beings or the more than human, the minerals. What would minerals say if they had to speak to us? What would their experience of the world be? I gave her a paper by Karen Brad, which was called Holding, and was talking about holding as an act within physics. And that influenced Niv in their creation of this extraordinary tent, which is meant to be like a place of refuge at a time of climate crisis, somewhere which can be transported, but somewhere you can be hidden. And within it, you can listen to minerals speaking. She did a speculative fiction piece with different minerals speaking from the past, the present, and also from the future, articulating their experience. Equally, they put themselves within the exhibition as well, because of course we can't get outside our own minds, we can only imagine outside our own minds. So they repurposed telephones and had kind of 2-minute little discussions about the guilt of when you're traveling and how that feels because of all the minerals you're using as you travel. And these repurposed phones were connected by cords which were colored by pigment, just like the tent. So the minerals were exerting themselves. And as we know, the phones are also powered by minerals. And these some of the most critical minerals within our phones today. 5 of them will no longer exist by the year 2050. So as we try and go speedier and faster, what we're doing is not spending money, really. We're spending millennia. We're throwing away millions of years which have taken minerals to form. Another piece which I worked with was with the glaciologists, looking at ice cores, which were actually hold the memory of the Earth within them, in the little bubbles, which you can see, which this hand is holding from Emma's piece. You can actually recreate the Earth from 2.5 million years ago, the chemistry of the Earth, which is extraordinary. And she was put in touch with Carlo, who is an extraordinary glaciologist who goes around the world drilling these ice cores, and then he's creating a library of ice in Antarctica where all these will be stored as a memory of the Earth and the composition of the Earth. So again, this is a place for me, I just thought, how poetic is this extraordinary thing? Bring an artist to this and see what happens out of that collision. And out of that collision came the most extraordinary piece, which Carlo himself couldn't quite understand. We went to the world's deepest diving pool. It was the deepest diving pool. It's no longer the deepest diving pool, beaten. And we put dancers within the diving pool who we trained for two weeks to free dive and dance underwater. And Carlo couldn't quite understand this. He was like, what on earth is going on with you? Why are you doing this? What has this got to do with glaciers? Because that's where he drills these ice cores. And what was happening was Emma was drawing the connection between the breath of the earth, which is contained in the ice cores, and the breath, the human breath, as well as shown by these bubbles within the piece. And when Carlo saw the piece, he actually cried, which was quite extraordinary. And during the whole process, that year-long process, he hadn't quite understood where we were going. But then he saw this piece, cried, and understood it. So for me, inspiration comes from so many different things. And it's always about the imagination. And for me, Mary Shelley has always been a bedrock for that. 17-year-old girl imagines one night this story of an inventor from all the facts of science which she knew at that time. There was lots of discussions about electricity and magnetism, and she evolved this story over one night in 1 hour about the great Dr. Frankenstein and his monster. And that is probably where the creative collisions come from. I've seen it in this extraordinary 18th century girl when she was 17 creating this novel, which was the first science fiction novel. But underneath everything, I would argue, everything is nature, and that was something which happened in the first day. Technology is nature because it comes from nature. Everything is powered from the earth, comes from the earth over thousands or millions of years. And we are of the earth. We are made of the stars as well. We're made from the universe, the bones we have. And even within our own human body, we recreate the moment when the universe was born, when inside us particles actually collide in our center. You can scan us, and then you will find out that these little electrical charges happen. And so that's like the beginning of the universe. It's exactly what happened at the beginning of the universe when antiparticles met particles. It's quite extraordinary. So we're all interconnected, and I would say because of that, and quantum physics is revealing that even more, because of that, we really need to think about how we act and are on the earth by our actions, and how we're connected to everything, and create a responsible world. But within it, it's also about imagining and using our senses to go beyond, to connect, and to be a portal also to ancient wisdoms and other ways of knowing. I've argued quite recently, as have many people, that quantum physics, even though it's a great science, is really treading in the grounds of ancient wisdom, which has always said, for example, how important the bones and the breath are to our worlds and life, but how all animal life, all non-sentient life is connected to us, and how more than human it is. So, just to wrap up, I believe, as I said, that the imagination is the place where we can embrace the entire world, because knowledge is limited. We should always question it whilst accepting it, but use it as a place and a jumping off point to go further, higher, further and better.